This guy could be.
Okay, good afternoon, everyone. We've got 11 bills for hearing today. The order should be correct outside on the screens. We're going to begin with 9:59, Senator Benson and the Treasurer Davis. You want to come up? Senator Benson.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman, Mr. Vice Chairman, and members of the committee. Let me begin by stating to everyone in this room that the entire membership of the Senate and the House are very unhappy. The governor is unhappy. The Speaker of the House is unhappy. The members of the House of Delegates are unhappy. The President of the Senate is unhappy. The Lieutenant Governor is unhappy. All of the senators are unhappy. And it's as a result of what you will hear relative to Senate Bill 959, Higher Education, Maryland 529 Program Reform. And I am here this afternoon to present this bill. This bill is about trust. As citizens of Maryland, we must continue to uphold the values of integrity and faith with the financial institutions that we are involved in. Currently, we do not see these values being upheld in this program, Maryland 529. The financial future of our children was in the hands of this institution, which mismanaged the money belonging to our wonderful Maryland parents of college students. Those who are not familiar with the unfortunate circumstances surrounding Maryland 29, many wonderful families of the great state of Maryland were unable to receive the benefits that the 529 board said that they were entitled. Imagine for a few moments of sending your child off to college to then encounter a problem with your hard-earned investment that was strategically planned out to set your child up for academic and financial success and financial stability. But to realize it's no longer accessible. What we're talking about this afternoon is a pressing issue that needs to be addressed because of many families who could not afford to send their children off to college. I know how crucial the subject of education is for our children because I am an educator, a retired educator of over 50 years. Hopefully I don't look that old. And that is why we need to protect their future. And so this legislation will abolish and repeal the Maryland 29 board. stating that the state treasurer is the successor to the Maryland 529 board. Quite frankly, we couldn't have chosen a more competent, outstanding person with integrity and knows how to get the job done. Giving the office of the state treasurer the responsibility for administering the 529 program is a very wise decision. In order to maintain and oversee the security of our investment, this transfers control of the Maryland 29 board to this wonderful state treasurer and phases out the prepaid plan. This solution would be effective in creating a way to supervise the different programs of the Maryland 529 board, the Maryland College Investment Plan, the Maryland Broker-Dealer College Investment Plan, and the Maryland ABLE program. In the United States, Maryland is ranked in the top 4 with the highest college graduation rate at 40.9%. We can maintain our sterling record of successful college students who greatly contribute to the success of the state of Maryland and even this wonderful nation by using the office of the state treasurer to administer the Maryland 529 program. Therefore, my wonderful friends, my colleagues, I'm respectfully urging that this committee issues a favorable report for Senate Bill 959. Thank you. I will now turn it over to our esteemed treasurer.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Mr. Vice Chairman, and members of the committee. For the record, my name is Derek Davis. I'm treasurer for the state of Maryland. To my right is Mr. John Martin, Chief Deputy Treasurer, and to his right is Laura Addis, Deputy Treasurer for Public Policy. Normally, I would say I've submitted my written testimony and just sort of freestyle a little bit and move on. But given the gravity of this situation, my staff and we've gone over every word of my testimony, and I want to do it verbatim. I don't want to risk leaving anything out or not properly addressing anything. So if you can just sort of bear with me, it's a little different from how I would normally testify before you. Let me start by thanking Senator Benson. Senator Benson and I go way back, and I certainly am aware of her passion for our young people and their education. So I thank her for taking on this task as well. So let me say, during my re-election speech last month, I committed to being a part of the solution to address the problems facing Maryland 529. Senate Bill 959 makes bold changes to the way the program is structured and governed. Instead of having an independent agency that is overseen by a board of directors, the program and its plan will be brought under the state treasurer's office. This places quite a bit of responsibility on my shoulders and that of the office. And while I'm not necessarily here to advocate for a change, I can tell you that taking on a program in the midst of a crisis is a weight that my team and I can bear with the proper support from the Maryland General Assembly. My written testimony does 3 things. Number 1, it provides information on the office's current staffing level and workload. Number 2, discusses resource needs to integrate the Maryland 529 program. And number 3, offers an amendment to clarify your intent, or what we believe is your intent. First, I know that you know about the work that the office does to issue debt, invest the state's money, and handle tort claims. What you may not know is that we have a very small team, 63 authorized employees who invest over $20 billion in assets, corporate bond sales of over $1 billion, process over 3,500 insurance claims, and handle our other work. Over the years, the staffing level for the office has not kept up with the pace of its work. Before even considering what the staff would need to oversee the 529 program, I hope that you will consider the needs that we have to provide baseline services. Second, the testimony outlines resources that we anticipate needing in order to address the challenges facing the program. Among the resources we believe we'll need to fill existing vacancies and hire the following additional staff: a deputy director, staff to perform contract management, customer and constituent service representatives, IT and human resource personnel, staff to perform legal and marketing functions as required by current law, and staff to assist the newly created work group. Additionally, we would ask for investments in IT to help us upgrade and integrate our website, and funding to hire consultants as needed to handle claims, review past practices, and communicate updates with the public. The 529 program is funded based on administrative fees on contracts with account holders. As I understand it, the program requires all of the funds that it currently holds. In order to hire additional staff, integrate IT systems, and hire consultants, I will need to ask for additional funding. I will also need to ask for flexibility, since it is impossible to accurately estimate what resources the State Treasurer Office requires in the short term. While we're on the funding point, I would also like to mention an amendment for your consideration. There are a number of account holders here and elsewhere who are waiting to see what sort of remedy the state will offer them. Senate Bill 959 proposes an interest payment that is really an incentive to roll over a prepaid account to the college investment plan before January 1, 2025. The bill does not, however, address a more comprehensive framework for adjudicating claims made against the trust. I am concerned that if the bill does not set up a framework, and if money is not appropriated to resolve these claims, the State Treasurer's Office will not be able to resolve these claims to the satisfaction of your constituent, our constituents, to their satisfaction. Your constituents are looking to you for guidance on how to navigate this situation, and I am looking to you for guidance on how to implement your will. Without a clear roadmap, I will only be able to get part of the way there. Let me be clear. If given the program, the State Treasurer's Office will do everything we can to resolve the issues. We would ask for time and patience, especially in the first year, as it takes time to integrate 529, hire staff, and make other improvements. John, as I mentioned, the Chief Deputy Treasurer, John Martin, and the Deputy Treasurer for Public Policy, Laura Addis, they're here to help respond to any questions that you may have. We appreciate your time today and will continue to make ourselves available to you in the coming days and weeks as you consider the best path forward. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Treasurer. Questions for this panel? Senator Roosevelt.
Thank you. And thank you for coming forward, Senator Benson, with the bill. And thank you, Mr. Treasurer, for being willing to take on this additional responsibility. The last point you made, I wanted you to flesh out a little bit more. What I think you're saying is that the bill as introduced doesn't deal with the issue of how to deal with the individual situations of the folks who were misled as to what their assets were, and that you're looking for some structure and some approach to how to deal with that. Did I understand that correctly?
Yes.
Yeah. Hi, Senator Roosevelt. That's correct. The bill has the interest payment, which is an incentive, but it doesn't speak to the more substantial remedies that your constituents have been calling for.
And do you all have specific proposals for the legislation along that line?
On that, sir, we were going to defer to the will of the legislature, but we would be more than happy to sit down with the committee to discuss any ideas, things that we've been hearing in relation to what you may need to address in the bill.
That'd be great. We'd appreciate it. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Treasurer, I have the utmost respect for you. And I have full confidence in what you're taking on. But I'm going to ask a question because I've had constituents call me. They've had some concerns. And I just want to give you a chance to kind of answer that with regards to the fact that you were on the board when this thing went down. And some people have said, well, he was on the board too. So, you know, we have problems with him. And I've told him many times that, you know, he's responsible for an agency that sees billions of dollars in investments, does an incredible job. So I just wanted to see if you could take a chance to answer that of why, you know, you were the best person for this job.
Sure. I was getting nervous. The more you kept building that up, I was like, oh, this is gonna be one heck of a question that's coming.
Well, I was trying to counter Senator Benson's her accolades for you.
Let me answer the question this way. What I would say for starters, and I don't want to in any way sound like I'm trying to pass the buck or anything like that. But I will say this. Yes, I was on the board, but the problem really initiated while I was still with you guys. I mean, it effectively, it wasn't discovered until like April of last year, but the decision was made in June of 21, and it was implemented in like November of 21. So I would start by saying, A, I wasn't there, but B, going forward, I would also say, I'm not, look, being a board member, as we all know, is you don't manage the day-to-day operations of any agency, whether it's the Board of Education, whatever the case may be, you set policy. But what I will say is once we found out about it, as the other board members in April, we started asking questions, and you know, we were given different dates and times as to when it would be resolved. So as presented to us, I was understanding that as it was being characterized, there was a calculation error. And I guess like any of us, you figure a calculation error is just that. Again, and in no way to sound like pointing fingers, but the dates of when it would be resolved kept moving. And so, you know, and so you can't really look that far ahead and figure out that it was in April that we would be here and we are still working towards getting it resolved. So I had no way of knowing that, just as you all didn't. What I am told is that from a calculation standpoint, that has been issued, and I don't know if the executive director will be speaking today or not, but I was informed that part has been done. But and actually in our work, I've figured out what the confusion is and what actually caused the error. And that's something we can certainly discuss in greater detail, because I think that's what Ms. Addis was referring to in terms of not the incentive to roll into the investment program, but the underlying factor that really got us to where we are today. We do have a handle on what caused that confusion. How that's going to be resolved, I think that's to be determined. But I would just close by saying to your constituent, I accept any responsibility from the time that I've been on this board, but I'm looking more forward than back in terms of, I don't think the folks really want to hear, you know, how it got there, but they want to know it's been enough time and they want to know, what am I going to do to get this resolved?
When was the decision made by this board to do this?
It's my understanding that it was June of 2021, and then it was implemented or it was expected to go forward on November 1 of 2021.
So June of 2021. When did you become state treasurer?
December 17th of 2021.
So both decision and implementation took place before you became treasurer.
Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Other questions? Okay,
Thank you.
thank you, Mr. Treasurer. Senator, thank you.
It always feels better sitting on that side than sitting over here. I don't know why. Thank you all.
Thank you, Senator. we're gonna move on to some of the other witnesses, all of whom appears to have signed up as favorable with amendments. So if you want to go back to your seat, Senator, that'd be fine. I see there's a bunch of you out there. You know what might be easiest if you have a first wave that want to come up and get in the seats, you're certainly welcome to do that. Whoever was signed up to testify. Yep, first in, yep. Make it easy. You can tell me who you are when you get started. Welcome, everyone. Appreciate you being here. And you can, whoever wants to begin can begin.
Hi, my name is Lisa Getter Peterson. I'm an account holder and a former investigative reporter. I learned decades ago the best way to get to the truth is to read the documents. So please read our original contracts and the 10-page brief I've submitted that explains this fiasco. Contracts will show that we've always had two ways to exit the prepaid trust: request a payment for tuition or roll over our accounts and earn plus or minus 100% of the investment earnings or losses. The Attorney General has hired a law firm to advise the 529 board on its liability. Documents show that the law firm set up its own 529 customer service call center, and any information it gets from account holders is considered attorney-client privilege. That's just wrong, and it's emblematic of this whole mess. Account holders have been treated as adversaries from the start. Article 9 of our contract says the board cannot make changes with an adverse impact. Changes require prompt notification so we can terminate contracts to protect ourselves. But the board spun its harmful changes as good news. Losing tens of thousands of dollars is not good news. Retroactive policy changes are not calculation errors. The federal government requires account holders to report the refund value of prepaid tuition plans on FAFSA filings. It regards them as an asset with a cash value. Other states freely provide this number, but Maryland never did until 2021, when it hired Intuition. For the first time, we got FAFSA values which tracked with the earnings we would get on rollovers. Those values were not a mistake. The bill before you must reinstate our earnings and honor those binding 2021 values. I'm almost done. Ignore the manual recalculations. They're not justifiable. Direct the governor to use the rainy day fund if necessary. Anything less continues to harm account holders. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Lori Delaney. I currently have prepaid accounts for my sons, Alex and Jack. In April 2022, I was told by Maryland 529 that my son's combined account rollover was $95,000. Now Maryland 529 says the total rollover value for my 5 remaining semesters is $10,361. I request that you make a change to the proposed bill to provide a guarantee that all account holders will receive earnings as defined in our original contracts. I'd like you to all consider the discrepancies that have contributed to the mess of the Maryland 529 Trust. The first discrepancy is related to the intent. One of the intentions of the 2021 changes was to distribute surplus funds, but the outcome of that is that thousands of long-term account holders are not receiving any of those surplus funds. This is during a time when college costs barely increased and the trust returns averaged over 6% per year. Instead, newer account holders will be guaranteed a rate of 6% for up to 20 years or more. The next discrepancy is the contract. The contracts we signed provide a rollover option based on the trust's since inception rate of return. The contracts we signed said Maryland 529 will not retroactively modify existing contract provisions in a manner adverse to me or my beneficiary. Yet Maryland 529 retroactively changed the rollover benefits for account holders whose children are current or upcoming college students. The third discrepancy is fiduciary responsibility. Maryland 529 has fiduciary responsibility to run the plan in the interest of participants and the beneficiaries. Instead, Maryland 529 is focused on building a legal defense to protect themselves against legal action from those they're supposed to be acting on behalf of. These are 3 examples, but there's many more discrepancies. Please modify the current bill to include a fix for those whose kids need their college funds now. Thank you for helping us.
My name is Vicki Evers, and I purchased a 4-year plan for my infant daughter in 2004 when the marketing brochure predicted that in 18 years, the cost of tuition would be $110,000. 10 years later, I was shocked to see that the actual cost was only $37,000. I pulled my contract to see how I could terminate this plan and put my money to better use, and saw that I had highlighted Article 7, which allowed a transfer of principal plus or minus 100% of the investment earnings. As the market was performing well, I began to monitor the trust returns to calculate my account value. My December 2021 statement indicated a value that was in line with this calculation. I had 30 days to dispute this value, or it would become correct and binding. In 2022, I called to verify my balance as my daughter was beginning the application process. Today, my account value is now less than half of what it was. We are told that the MPCT is a defined benefit plan, not an investment plan. However, it has always had an investment return component via the rollover option. It's also a really great investment plan for those who contributed just prior to November 2021. They are guaranteed 6% compounded monthly for up to 28 years, regardless of the trust's investment performance. They are receiving the trust surplus that currently exists due to the grossly overestimated tuition cost prediction and the amazing investment earnings on my contribution and others like me that were made 18 or so years ago. To shift the overage that the trust has accumulated over the 18 years that I have been an account holder to those that are enrolled many years later is not only a contract violation, it is also not equitable, fair, or reasonable. My family could never have imagined that the state would pull the rug out from under us in the 11th hour. My daughter must commit to a college by May 1st, and we have no idea what our budget is. I'm thankful to you all for trying to make this right, but in order to do so, we need an amendment to honor our contract, allowing 100% of investment earnings, as the thousands of contract holders before us have had, and those after us will have too. And we need these funds to be available to pay tuition due in August. Thanks.
Hi, good afternoon, committee members. I'm Monica Heinlein. I'm a resident of District 13, a Maryland Public School counselor, the proud mother of Matthew, who's a sophomore at Howard Community College, and Connor, who's now a freshman at Towson University. And I support Senate Bill 959 with amendments. I opened Maryland prepaid trust accounts for both my boys in 2008 and then 2009, the years they entered kindergarten, to prevent them from becoming part of the student loan debt crisis plaguing our country. Maryland 529's narrative that there was a calculation error that needed to be fixed is false. Until early 2022, account values calculated by trust staff for rollovers equaled contributions plus compounded earnings since date of inception at a rate of approximately 5.5 to 6%, in keeping with our contracts. By April 2022, Maryland 529 put a hold on rollovers until they fixed what they claim was a calculation error. In 2021, I had rolled over my son Matt's trust accounts to the 529 investment plan. Per the contract, his principal plus $14,000 in earnings were rolled over. Unfortunately, I didn't do the same for Connor. His accounts are currently stuck in the trust and have lost over $13,000 in earnings due to the Maryland 529's harmful fix for an error that really didn't exist. This harmful fix decimated earnings on accounts opened prior to November 2021. The fact is, the board didn't like how rollover values were calculated per our contracts, so they reinterpreted and changed contract language and applied it retroactively under the guise of a calculation error fix. Senate Bill 959 needs an amendment to ensure that our account values are restored to include earnings as stated in our contracts and reflected as the FAFSA value on our 2021 annual statements. We need your help and the treasurers to make this happen swiftly before our tuition bills are due next semester. Thank you for your time and support.
Good afternoon, honorable senators. I'm Ezra Grivoff, a resident of Rockville and a freshman at Emerson College up in Boston. Right now, I'm actually on spring break, and trust me, I'd much rather be in my room relaxing. But this is so important to me, and that is why I am here to testify. What is $52,000? Just think about that for a second. It could be a hospital bill, could be someone's annual salary. But for me, it's a full year of college tuition missing from my MPCT account. The fact is, the Maryland 529 Trust disclosed that there was $52,000 of investment earnings available for me for rollover twice in 2021 on official letterhead, and I had every reasonable expectation to rely upon this. My contract entitles me to 100% of the investment earnings, that is the gains or losses that the trust made by investing our funds from our first contribution back in 2004 to the day of the rollover. It also says, although the board can amend the terms of the contract from time to time, it cannot be adverse to the trust participants. In the 2021 to 2022 MPCT disclosure statement, the board removed the word investment and just left the vague word earnings in its rollover paragraph. All of a sudden, $52,000 of investment earnings disappeared from my trust account. That is the heart of the problem. The trust board's arbitrary recasting of the rollover benefits by removing the word investment is adverse to the trust participants and breaches the terms of my contract. This needs to be corrected now. In less than 6 months, the fall 2023 tuition bills are due. Although the Senate Bill 959 is a step in the right direction, it does not provide the immediate relief that I need and to avoid unexpected debt. I suggest that an amendment that provides immediate support for the rollover access to the contributions and investment earnings that we rely upon. Thank you for your consideration.
My name is Eric Marshall. I have 2 accounts at the Maryland 529 that I opened in 2002 and 2003. I have 2 kids in college currently. I have another one going next year to Salisbury University, and I have a 9th grader. As you've heard, there's been a lot of misunderstanding about the minimum benefit calculation and the change that was made effective November 2021. 3 weeks ago, the 529 sent out an email to account holders. In the email, they stated that the board's intended 6% interest or earnings only applied to balances starting on November 2021. I have submitted 3 emails from 529 staff that disputes this. I have 2 emails from Jana K. Kanan, who was the Director of Budget and Finance Administration at the time, and an email from the Maryland 529 general mailbox. All 3 emails that I received in August of 2021 clearly state that the 6% earnings rate would apply to from the time my contributions were made, not November 1 of 2021. They are changing the interpretation, and we relied on the information that we were given at the time. Also, the Maryland 529 sent in an email and said that the miscalculations were only on the website from November 9th of 2021 till April 15th of 2022. This is a false statement. As of this morning, March 15th, 2023, account holders can log into their account and view the FAFSA value that was stated that the 529 is defining as incorrect. I'm urging the Maryland legislature to require the 529 to honor the change effective November 2021 that increases the earnings rate on the minimum benefit calculation to 6% from the date of your contribution. Thank you very much for your time. Yeah.
Have any of you gotten what they call the hand calculated recalculation?
Yes.
And could you share with us the comparison of the numbers, what they said in December of 2021, and then what they say after the handwritten recalculation?
Mine went from 95,000 plus to 10,361.
And how does that relate to the face value before they made any calculation?
So I originally invested $60,000 in 2004 for my two kids. If you calculate, if you just did interest over a period of time, it would have been even much higher than 95,000.
But you put in 60?
And
Yeah.
I've used some of the semesters.
That's, I
Yeah.
realize it's a little complicated, but I'm trying to get my head around the scale of the difference between what you thought you were guaranteed, what you put in, what the December 21 number was, and then what the handwritten number is.
So
Is there
the
anybody
nine-
who can give a simple example? We don't have to ask everybody. I'm just trying to
Yeah.
get,
I was gonna say the 95,000 would have been mostly in, so maybe about 75,000 of it would have been interest over the, 16 or so years that the money had been invested. And then the rest would have been there should have been about 20,000 in principal left. And then probably about 40,000 spent on tuition.
would anyone else like to give examples from?
I'll say that in my scenario, my estimate was $91,000. I contributed a lump sum back in 2002 and 2003, about 45 grand. I have used some amounts, and now they're telling me my minimum balance is zero. So I have 8 semesters remaining at approximately $5,000 a semester. So instead of 91,000, I have 40,000.
Thank you.
The problem is the manual recalculation, which under the FAFSA rules, it's supposed to be the refund value of the accounts. And to refund your account, you need to do a rollover. Prior to, so the 2021 FAFSA documents that we're counting on used the rollover investment earnings rate. The manual calculations are using a minimum benefit calculation that was in our contracts, but it was rarely used. If you go back in 2018, Aaron Layton, who was the executive director, testified to the legislature here that no one ever used the minimum benefit calculation, but that's what they're
When
using.
you say the minimum benefit calculation, I thought that was the equivalent number for the state tuition.
No,
that a different thing?
It's actually,
Totally different.
it's totally different.
Okay, I apologize.
And so what they're using on the manual calculations is basically the treasury rate and as interest, which would never apply to rollovers. Nowhere in any contract, even to this day, does it apply to rollovers. And for most of the time I had my account, that value was zero. So it wiped out everything.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mr.
Next group can come on up. Get started as soon as you're ready.
Hi, everyone. My name is Victoria Sansone. And in August 1st of 2013, I invested over $167,000 for my 4 children. I have a sophomore in college at University of Tennessee. And I have triplet juniors who are in high school, getting ready to graduate in a year. And right now, I'm going to keep this really short. I literally got my manual calculations right before I walked in here today. And I am like shaking at this point because the calculations literally are telling me that I've made $4,000 on my $167,000 investment, that I was supposed to get 6% monthly rollover. However, I have previous letterhead Maryland 529 documents that show me rollovers from 2020 and then my sophomore in University of Tennessee that should be at the time of May 14th of 2021, her account should have been worth $67,357. And Out of the 41 I had put in for her, I should have had that extra $12,000. Now they're saying that's all gone, about $1,000 extra. We committed for her to go to University of Tennessee based upon that money. She's actively needing her tuition paid. Plus, I have the 3 others right behind. I'm gonna have 4 in college at the same time in 24, 25. This is scary. This is scary stuff. I am literally shaking in my seat. You guys need to help us correct this and get our money refunded. I beg of you. Thank you. Sorry.
Yeah, we all feel it.
I-
We've all had our tears in this room, and the parents here. My name is Heather Boley, and I am a resident of Calvert County and work for PG County Public Schools. My family enrolled in the Maryland Prepaid Trust Fund when our 3 children were first born. 18 years later, my children are faced with financial burdens because the prepaid trust retroactively changed the terms of our contracts regarding earning calculations for rollovers. In February 2022, we were told our 3 accounts had a FAFSA rollover value of $271,000. After the retroactive change in earning calculations, we are now told our 3 accounts only have a value of $120,000. This is a clear breach in Article 9 of our contracts that state no changes would be made to a contract that would harm the beneficiary. However, if such a change had to occur, the account holders would be notified and given 60 days to roll over or refund accounts for previous contract earnings. We never received said notice or option. I believe your committees are aware of the harm done, but now we need to talk about the fix. We need Senate Bill 959 to include an amendment that clearly outlines how the treasurer will make families whole. Making us whole means our contractual values are restored to include 100% of the trust investment earnings as stated in our contracts since inception of the prepaid plan in 1998. This practice has been the precedent set for over 20 years. We need our December 2021 statement values honored, as that statement was in line with prepaid's contractual terms. I propose that until the work group can report on their findings, this bill include an amendment that directs the treasurer to allocate dollars through the Maryland Rainy Day Fund and provide immediate money for those of us with students in college or about to enter college. Most of us need the money now and don't have the luxury of time to wait. You will hear from my daughter, who's currently at University of Pittsburgh, skipping one of her classes to testify here on Zoom because we don't have the money to pay for her next year.
Hi, my name is Tammy Glasser. Thank you for allowing me to testify today. The Maryland 529 staff and board have proven again and again that they do not care about the families and the beneficiaries they have harmed. Their mismanagement, false information, poor communication, and breaches of contract cannot continue. I support transferring the Maryland Prepaid College Trust to the Office of the State Treasurer with amendments that will uphold the terms of our contract, reinstate our binding 2021 account values plus earnings to date, and use the governor's rainy day fund to reimburse families who have suffered financial hardships due to the freeze on our earnings. Account holders, the previous Maryland 529 staff, intuition, and actuaries all had the same understanding of our contracts and earning calculation. But for some reason, the board made the decision to retroactively change the terms of rollovers and refunds that reduced account values by thousands of dollars. They claim that the correct calculation for contributions before November 2021 receives the earning rate of the one-year treasury minus 1.2%, which is pretty close to zero. But this news came in an email saying how Maryland 529 is distributing additional earnings due to the trust surplus. So it doesn't make sense that families are losing money. I have repeatedly asked to see where this change is documented in our contract, but I have yet to receive a response because simply it does not exist. For at least 6 months after this date, Maryland 529 staff continued to counsel families like mine on how rollovers receive 6% earnings for which we based our college decision. Families will not accept anything less, and we will not allow our kids to pay the price by taking out student loan debt because of the mistakes made by Maryland 529. We thank you and the treasurer for your support.
Dear members of the committee, thank you for allowing me to speak today. My name is Robert Dyer, and I'm here to tell you about my daughter Nadia's Maryland 529 account issues. When our daughter was a toddler, we paid a lump sum of $25,500. Our December 2021 statement showed her account had a FAFSA value of $60,101. In 2022, we were told by Maryland 529 that earnings were frozen and they were not sure when it would be fixed. We were becoming very concerned about what was happening with the account and made a decision to do a rollover with the money to a Franklin Templeton 529 plan. We were told by Maryland 529 that we could only roll over the principal because earnings were still frozen. The rollover process was a nightmare from start to finish. We did not get access to the funds until the beginning of January 2023. We ended up having to dip into our emergency fund to pay all of 2022 out of our pocket. This has caused financial hardships for our family, as well as many sleepless nights and high levels of stress. We rolled over our principal of $25,500 minus a $700 administrative fee charged by Maryland 529, leaving us with less money than we originally had put in the account approximately 15 years earlier. Even though we did a rollover, we received a confirmation letter from Maryland 529, which was full of errors stating that our refund was complete. We never requested a refund, nor did we take a refund. We fear that we have lost roughly $34,600 because we did a rollover. Our online Maryland 529 account shows canceled. We have now come to realize that this was not a calculation error at all, but a breach of contract. Maryland 529 leadership and board members changed how rollovers are paid out retroactively, reversing investment earnings. I want my rollover to be carried out based on the written contract and disclosure and based on how rollovers were calculated prior to November 2021. I want my earnings to be restored to the FAFSA value on my 12/31/2021 statement, plus the earnings accrued in 2022 and 2023. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, committee, for allowing me to speak. You give us hope that this can be rectified in a timely manner for us parents that got to pay for a college education. I have 3 accounts. I paid $160,000 into those 3 accounts starting back in 2007, over 17 years. I haven't taken any of that money out. Essentially, I don't have access to that money. And I have nobody to call. When I call Intuition, the program manager, they tell me they can't speak to me because I want to do a transfer. They give me an 800 number that is a call center and they can't answer any questions. When I write emails directly to the executive director or to the program, they don't respond. They don't answer the phone call. If you could imagine having $160,000 tied in the bank and you don't have anybody to call about that account to go over the details. I received a manual calculation, and this is, for me, this is where the breach of contract is, because they changed the calculation on the rollover. We're entitled to our payments, our contributions, plus our trust returns, okay? Essentially, this trust is our money. The state of Maryland's not paying into this trust. It's us parents who are paying into the trust, and they invest that money and it earns a return. So we're entitled to those returns, okay? I'd like to, one thing that I haven't heard mentioned here is there was a whistleblower, Spencer Fell, who gave an hour press conference. He worked for the Maryland Prepaid College Trust for 16 years. He answered almost any question that you could ask about our situation. It's well worth an hour of your time to watch that press conference. I'm sure it's on YouTube. One of the other things I would like to mention is that the state treasurer asked about a framework. How about following the contract and paying that speaks specifically to paying out rollovers with pay contributions plus 100% of trust returns? Thank you. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much. We really appreciate you sharing, all of you sharing your personal stories. So powerful testimony. Thank you. Any questions for this panel? Thank you all very much. There are still more who are testifying in person. You can come up now. Anyone else in person? Okay, it looks like that's it for now. We have virtual testimony. We have some people in the queue. How many people do we have in the queue? Hi, and welcome. At the print on that's too small, so I can't really see your name. So if you just,
Hi.
everybody want to introduce themselves when they start.
Hi, I'm Abigail Boley. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to share my story. My name is Abby Boley, and I grew up in Calvert County. Currently, I am a college freshman attending school at the University of Pittsburgh. My parents opened an MPCT account for me when I was 1 year old in 2005. In February 2022, I was told that my trust had a FAFSA rollover value of $94,000. I received a merit scholarship and earned enough college credits when I was in high school to graduate college in 3 years versus 4. These factors were ultimately what led me to decide to enroll at Pitt while being able to remain debt-free. It was during my first year of college that we learned my funds were frozen for rollover, and the manual recalculation showed that I only had a value of $35,000. The amount of anxiety and stress caused by the MPCT has been very difficult to deal with. My focus should be on getting good grades and excelling in my studies in order for me to be successful with my career path. Instead, MPCT has made it so my focus has been on worrying about how I'm going to pay my next college bills. I currently have a 3.8 GPA at Pitt, and I've honored most of Pitt's general education requirements. So transferring to another school would cost me extra time and money in order for me to honor new general education requirements at a different school. In the end, it does not make financial sense for me to transfer. I am only 18, and I'm told I may have to take out exorbitant loans with high interest to pay for my college degree. I don't understand why the 529 board decided to make changes that were detrimental to those of us who are in college or about to start college. My parents opened a college trust for me almost 18 years ago so I could attend college without fear of debt. I asked that the state of Maryland prevent this from happening by adding an amendment to Senate Bill 959 that restores rollover values to the original contract terms immediately. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you for sharing your story. Anybody have any questions for Abigail? Next up, all I see is Mark. Is it Wozer? Is it your Mr. Wozer?
Hello, can you hear me?
I can. Welcome.
Okay, thank you. I am still having feedback from the last person speaking. To that end, I would like to get my time back on the clock because it was backing. There's a 15-second delay.
Just go ahead, sir. You'll be fine. Go ahead, sir.
Okay.
Just go ahead. You'll
Thank
be fine.
you.
Yep.
There's a lot of feedback. So,
Okay.
can you guys?
We can hear you fine. I don't know. You're getting feedback from us?
Yes. It's a 15-second delay.
Are you watching? Do you have YouTube up? Sir?
Can you hear me?
We can hear you. Do you have YouTube on in the background?
Fine. I'll just say it this way. I'm willing to help on this. I've submitted many pages, volumes. I know the numbers inside and out. I will be willing to help on this committee. I also want to point it out that I have asked for, under Sarbanes-Oxley, previous records for 2020, 2019, 17, 16. I asked that with the treasurer, from the treasurer's office. They even sent a note to 529. We have received nothing. That is a potential violation of Sarbanes-Oxley, which documents the numbers that were presented over and over again are correct. Speaking of numbers, the vice chair asked if anybody has manual calculations. I've presented that. there was 105 months consecutive that were omitted from the calculation. That is in my testimony, both to the House and to the Senate. Now, there's a very simple solution. 2 steps. 1, you act boldly. You trash the amendment from 2021, remove it, wipe it off the books, go back to what it was before. You take the number from 2021, multiply it by 1.096, use the rainy day fund to make it up, we move on. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We appreciate your testimony. Kirk, it looks like.
Good afternoon. My name is Kirk Litton, holder of 2 prepaid 529 accounts opened in 2008 and 2010 with lump sums. I have one request of Maryland 529 in this committee. Honor our contracts. Honor Articles 4 and 9 to do no harm via calculation or benefit changes to those contracts. Honor our rights to rollovers or refund of our payments, plus 100% of investment earnings realized on our payments stated in Article 6 or 7 of those contracts from 1998 to 2021. Honor the thousands of calls to Maryland 529 staff that counseled us on our 2 exit choices since 1998. Honor my 2012 call to Maryland 529 to confirm the rollover benefit earnings calculation when I moved. Honor my June 2020 manually requested rollover calculation statement done by Maryland 529 staff showing my 2 accounts valued at $120,000. Honor my September 2021 manual rollover calculation statement done by Maryland 529 staff showing my 2 accounts valued at $130,000. Honor my December 2021 annual statement calculated by intuition showing my 2 accounts valued at $155,000 using a new earnings calculation that did and should apply to prior years, 6% apply to prior years to keep us whole compared to our prior rollover calculation rates in our contracts. There is no honor in what Maryland 529 is doing to Maryland families that invested for the last 2 decades. There's no honor in labeling this as a defined benefit, calculation error, one-time bank statement, or using the words intent versus what is actually contractually in our contract and is binding. Intent. I don't care what their intent was. I want what is written in my contracts. We want what is owed to us. The same earnings paid to thousands of families before us that they have since frozen and then removed from our accounts over the last 12 months. This is a breach of contract resulting in a loss of $75,000 to my 2 kids. Stop their false narratives and incorrect calculations. They are using an interest rate not found anywhere in the new contracts, not associated with the rollover cash out value in the old contracts. Stop this insanity. They have hired lawyers, accountants, and PR crisis management teams. We only have you. Please help us restore our rollover investment earnings to years before 2021. So in August, we can pay our college bills. Thank you.
Next up, we have Ms. Wrigley. Is that right? I think your mute is on. Ms. Wrigley, hello?
Can you hear me?
We can now.
This is the host. Hi.
Hi, you can begin now.
Okay. Hi, my name is Natalie Wrigley. I'm calling from Houston, Texas. My son, Owen Wrigley, is the beneficiary of 2 Maryland prepaid college trust accounts. We are in favor of Senate Bill 959 with amendments that will address the beneficiaries in the middle. Owen will graduate in 2024 and will need to access the earnings of his account through a rollover because we live in Texas and he will not be attending a Maryland school. He needs to have these reinstated like everybody else before him. Y'all, the Maryland Prepaid College Trust is hiding behind their $1 million Nelson's Mullins contract. It must be great for them getting top shelf free help while the parents, the casualties of all this, use their own time to make sense of everything, sleuth around. That's what we do. We sleuth around trying to figure out what exactly happened to their money and make alternate financial arrangements for their children and organize the fight to get our money. Yeah, we organize on Facebook to try to get our money back. And you know what? I'm kind of scared the treasurer will also hide behind a Nelson Mullins contract. So please, please add an amendment to the bill. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Ms. Herman, is it? Cheryl Moss Herman? Hello, can you hear me?
I think I'm still on.
Ms. Herman? Ms. Herman?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes. You can
Great,
begin.
thank you. My name is Cheryl Moss Herman. Please move Senate Bill 959 with very important amendments that remedy the harm caused to account holders by detrimental reliance on program officials and agents and by breach of contract. While Maryland 529 officials will tell you that the trust pays in semesters, it's important that you know that these benefits have a monetary value. This monetary value must be calculated according to contract terms, not only for minimum benefits, but also for rollovers and refunds. Both the FAFSA value and the 1099-Q reported to the IRS are monetary values. The current 529 leadership now tells me that the monetary values shared with me by the prior executive director in May of 2022, that's after April when they told you they identified the problem, and those values that are consistent with the binding end of year 2021 statement are wrong. What do I do about that? We relied on that information to make very important financial decisions. In your actions, you and the treasurer must recognize the harm caused to Maryland college students and their families through detrimental reliance on state agency actions and breach of contract regarding rollover terms. Senate Bill 959 must be amended to require the trust to honor its contract terms, enabling transfers with 100% of investment earnings. Accounts with students in college like mine should be prioritized. Consider access to the governor's rainy day fund to cover extraordinary expenses incurred by some due to detrimental reliance. Together, these remedy much of the harm. The work group should explore future accountability and transparency of the 529. The work should begin immediately and conclude its work by December 2023 to allow the findings to be considered during the next legislative session if needed. The work group should have subpoena power. The results should be made public contemporaneously with transmittal to the governor. No more hide the ball. The current situation is unacceptable. We need resolution, accountability, transparency, and trust. Our kids' college futures are in your hands. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Do we have anyone else to testify? Okay. All right. Thank you very much. Thank you to everyone who came out, everybody online. Appreciate your testimony, your stories. And we will keep working.
Thank you.
All right. Senator Feldman. Chairman. Senate Bill 900.
Yes, thank you. If I could bring up my panel, and I apologize if when I'm done presenting, we're in the middle of a voting session. If you don't mind, I'm gonna
do what you need
go
to do,
back
Mr. Chairman.
downstairs, but
Yeah.
let me just I think the entire session, I keep referencing Governor Moore's inaugural address where he stated, quote, "Clean energy is not just going to be part of the Maryland economy. It will define the Maryland economy." In this session, we continue to do a number of things in that space. We have a bill on offshore wind on the floor today, literally, and we'll see it tomorrow. So the Maryland Clean Energy Center was created back by the Maryland General Assembly in 2008. And its core mission is to advance the adoption of clean energy, energy efficiency products, technologies, leveraging private capital and private sector capabilities and efforts to create and retain green jobs, driving economic business development in our state, assist in the commercialization of innovative technologies, and drive reductions in greenhouse gas emissions. This entity, again, the Maryland Clean Energy Center, has been able to leverage more than $165 million in private capital with only $12.1 million invested in public funds. So with that background, Mr. Chair, Senate Bill 900 for your consideration. It's an interesting, innovative idea. It establishes the Climate Technology Founders Fund within the Maryland Clean Energy Center to provide early stage funding for startup companies to develop climate technology, solar, wind, energy storage, grid modernization, measures that reduce greenhouse gas emissions. The focus of this fund will be recipients who have graduated from the Maryland Energy Innovation Accelerator program, which was created in 2019 to focus specifically on early stage technology commercialization in the clean energy space, involving partnerships with Maryland-based universities and laboratories to support the state's clean energy and climate goals. One of the provisions deals with these recipients have to come up with matching funds. You'll see in the fiscal note, again, we're talking about leveraging public dollars against private dollars. There's federal grant money involved as well. So under the bill for fiscal year 2025, the governor must include a one-time $500,000 allocation in the budget appropriation. I understand we're moving away from mandated appropriations and the like. I'll leave that to the wisdom of the committee on how best to achieve that $500,000 number in FY 25. But if you look at the fiscal note, and you'll hear some of the testimony here, so we're talking about this $500,000 allocation from the state, matched one-on-one by the recipients. There's federal grants and other programs that are contemplated here. So what's envisioned, and I think if you look at the testimony that's already been submitted, the fund will be used, this $500,000 fund, to issue 9 convertible notes of $50,000 each to the applicants who've graduated, again, from the Maryland Energy Innovation Accelerator program. The other $50,000 will be for administrative expenses. Convertible notes, for those of you who don't follow this type of thing, are short-term debt instruments that are converted into equity at a later date. So then after that investment, proceeds from the sale, there could be dispositions related to financing made from the fund, repayment of financing from the fund, interest earnings, and any other money from any other source accepted for the benefit of the fund. And I think the MCEC has laid out a realistic plan that they could double the return of that original $500,000 investment over a 5 to 8 year period. The bill calls for the establishment of a fund oversight committee appointed by the Maryland Clean Energy Center board that will evaluate all the possible projects to provide financing to, secure private financing, and generally administer and approve expenditures from the fund. The MCEC will report to the General Assembly each year on the outcomes of those investments. So with that, that's what the bill does, Senate Bill 900. And I just moved the bill favorable, but with that, Mr. Chair, I've got a great panel. I think we've got 2 live witnesses, 2 virtual, to answer kind of again how this would operate, this particular fund, if we invest, et cetera. So with that, I'll take some questions, and if not, I'm going to split.
Questions for the chairman? Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman, Mr. Vice Chairman, distinguished members of the committee. I'm Kathy Magruder, the Executive Director of the Maryland Clean Energy Center, and I'm here today with my colleague Wade Harley, who runs the Maryland Energy Innovation Accelerator. As the Senator explained, you know that we are an instrumentality of state, and the program we're focused on is enabling climate tech commercialization. The question is, why should you care and support this bill? The competitive edge for the United States and our state economically is our global leadership in discovering technologies that can be deployed to address challenges society faces. Climate change challenges our very survival. The Maryland Clean Energy Center is well positioned to help compete on this field, with Maryland universities and laboratories based in our state leading in the development of technologies, products, and services to help address this challenge, including battery storage, carbon capture, energy generation technologies, HVAC efficiencies, and so on. This bill will help fill a gap in supporting the evolution of companies seeking to transfer a patentable or licensable discovery to a marketable product. What we do at MEIA is wrap executive expertise around the technology to pull it to the marketplace. We're not waiting for the inventor to create a company. The idea of the Founders Fund is that a small appropriation has the potential to fill that gap and turn into more investment from private venture capitalists to carry the company to its next phase in the commercialization continuum. Wade and our panelists will talk a little bit about why this funding is so important and how it can help them. I would like to urge your favorable support of this bill to help equip companies and employers of the future in Maryland to win jobs, tax revenue for the state, and the environmental benefits that can be realized with the deployment of their solutions.
Thank you. I would also like to thank the committee for their time and request a favorable report. Just to put a fine point on what the fund will do. The gap that we're trying to fill is from the moment that they have de-risked the product to gaining future funding for their company, be it equity, be it from the federal government, being the gap we have, and one of the biggest ones to fill is patent improvement. Our companies, we have 4 now that are in the process of trying to raise capital, but they need funds today to improve their patents, both here in the United States and internationally, to protect their inventions. Right now, the different funding that they have will not cover those costs. There are others, but that's the biggest gap, and that's the importance and the timing of this. An investment today in patents will help them get an investment, hopefully from a TEDCO, from a momentum fund, and from others. So that's why we're requesting this appropriation. And again, we would appreciate a favorable report.
Aaron, can you tell me, I have 2 questions. One is, do you have other funds within MCEC? 1, and 2 is, what is your optimum amount that you want to raise for this fund?
So to answer your first question, Senator, the current structure of MCEC is such that we do not have other funds to invest. We will, starting the first of fiscal year 24, have the endowment of the Climate Catalytic Capital, or C3 fund, that we can use to leverage private investment to deploy market-ready solutions for consumer audiences and stakeholders across the state, different than a new early stage technology that's still being developed. If you think about the biotechnology wave that we facilitated in Maryland from the 80s and on, this is the next wave. This is where the money will be made in the future. And we think Maryland should position itself to be at the forefront of that, the way they did with the biotech economic development strategy. I hope that answers your question. You asked a second question about how much we would raise from this. The intention of this is not so much to raise revenue to go back into the fund in great amounts, as it is to make sure that the companies that we've been nurturing have a launch pad to really make money. There's a small equity piece of the fund, but that would just go back in for future reinvestment with other companies.
So I appreciate that. Thank you. And I think this is a great idea. So I'm not coming from that, perspective of being critical. I'm just sort of curious. You see this as a revolving
Yes.
loan fund of $500,000, or you want to, grow it with private sector donations?
That would be ideal, is if we could grow it with private sector partnership. This would be a starting point, and we're not looking to hit the mark with a big tank full of gas. We're looking to see how it works with a little investment to start with, because we wouldn't want to ask you for a lot and then not have it be successful or have it work for the purposes we think it needs to be used for.
So I appreciate that. I'm just curious. $500,000 is not a lot
No,
of
it's
money.
not.
Right. So that's why.
It's not.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Yeah, I think you have a couple virtual. Oh, they didn't come. Okay. Thank you.
Excuse me, Senator. Made it favorable with an amendment on this bill? Yes. Good afternoon. My name is Alex Pavlak. I'm a PhD engineer from Severna Park, the chair of the Future of Energy Initiative, a former director of the Maryland Clean Energy Center, a current member of the MIA Advisory Committee. I do support the legislation. It's a good idea, and the caliber of the people involved is good. This should be a very interesting experiment. My objection to this bill is the approved list of technologies to be funded, that this continues Maryland's policy of ignoring nuclear power. You look around the world, every clean power grid in the world is dominated by some combination of nuclear and hydro. There are 8 of them. There's no doubt that nuclear power can get to zero. It is a proven technology. Some people don't like it, which is why we have new nuclear power to deal with these concerns. In contrast, renewables run into reliability problems at 20% penetration. PJM just issued a report saying, hey, if you guys build this offshore wind, we're going to have capacity problems. In my world, renewables are not a proven technology, at least not yet. Nuclear clearly is. We have a Maryland company that just sold 4 nuclear reactors to Dow Chemical without the assistance of Annapolis. In my view, it is not in Maryland's best interest to continue to ignore nuclear power. I recommend that new nuclear technologies be placed at the top of the list of approved technologies for this legislation. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for the opportunity to express an opinion. Okay. Questions?
Welcome.
Thank you. Mr. Vice Chair and members of the committee. I have first Senate Bill 918 for you this afternoon. 5 years ago, this committee passed legislation that established the Community College Facilities Renewal Grant Program to provide grants for improvements, repairs, and deferred maintenance projects at Maryland's 16 community colleges. The grant is based on a percentage of the Community College Construction Grant Program, and each year 8 colleges are eligible for the grant. No college can receive the grant 2 years in a row. This grant program has been very helpful in funding repairs and improvements at our community colleges, but as our schools continue to age, the construction costs continue to rise, and the funding needs to keep pace. Senate Bill 918 will increase the funding from 5% of the annual appropriation for the Community College Construction Grant to 10% and allow all 16 community colleges to receive funding each fiscal year. We continue to ask our community colleges to try to hold the line on tuitions, but without the resources to fund necessary repairs and improvements, increased tuition may be their only option. Senate Bill 918 will help our community colleges continue to provide an affordable, high quality, higher education in an environment that supports students' safety and learning. And I ask for a favorable report.
Thank you. Mr. Phillips, I'm sorry. I should have called you up before. I apologize.
It's okay, Chair. Good afternoon, Chair, members of the committee. My name is Brad Phillips. I'm the Executive Director of the Maryland Association of Community Colleges, and I would just like to thank Senator King for introducing this legislation. I'll talk about it from 2 perspectives. One of the things that it does, the Facilities Renewal Grant really does help the community colleges move their deferred maintenance. They have over $150 million in deferred maintenance. And the second thing this bill would do was allow every college to receive an equitable amount every year. Currently, every other year a college can receive it. And depending on where you fall in that, you could end up with a $200,000 facilities renewal grant or a $400,000 facilities renewal grant, depending on where you are. This really would equalize the amount each college receives. As you can imagine, a community college of Baltimore County or a Montgomery college with over 45 facilities, has huge needs compared to a smaller campus that might only have 12 facilities as well. And this would allow them to have ability to get those projects funded through a facilities renewal grant instead of having to go to the community college capital construction grant, which ultimately they've had to do in the past to get some of the deferred projects through. So this would be an equitable distribution of funds to all community colleges, and there would be no issues with one college receiving less the prior year or in the future, depending on what that 5% is that's currently pegged to the grant. So we just urge you a favorable report, and really just happy to introduce you to this concept as well this year. And hopefully, if it doesn't go through this year, we have another opportunity in the future to talk more about this. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Are there questions, members of the committee, for Senator King or Mr. Phillips? Thank you.
Thank you.
That concludes the hearing on Senate Bill 918. Now we go to Senate Bill 968. Senator King.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chair and members of the committee. In 2010, our former colleague, Senator Rich Madaleno, introduced legislation to close the loophole in our tax law that was allowing large corporations to avoid paying corporate income taxes to the tune of about $10 million a year. The bill passed, and large corporations were no longer able to shift the ownership of the real property holdings to a subsidiary real estate investment trust, REIT, and then deduct the rent that they paid back to themselves from their state income tax. Shortly after the passage of the 2007 legislation, the Multi-State Tax Commission developed a model language for other states trying to resolve this issue of tax avoidance, and they updated the language to reflect current investment practices, including regulations that are imposed on foreign-owned companies. Working with the Comptroller's Office, we developed Senate Bill 968, which simply updates our tax law on REITs to conform with Multi-State Tax Commission model language. This change will ensure that those companies that are properly using REITs as legitimate forms of investment are not penalized in Maryland, while those corporations using REITs for tax avoidance will still be denied under Maryland law. I ask for a favorable report on 968, and I do have one technical amendment, and we will be sending that to council.
Thank you. I have one question. What is the fiscal note on this? I don't have it in front of me.
Come on.
Well, yeah, feel free to come up. We have Mr. Johansson and Mr. Gregory. I want to give you a chance to testify, but I just want a quick question so we have our head around what the fiscal note is.
It basically says it's indeterminate, Mr. Chairman. The Comptroller's Office specifically notes in the fiscal note, they would need to take a look at individual by individual entity. We know for the client that we represent, this is consistent with current practice. It does not result in any tax increase or decrease with respect to the properties that URW owns in the state.
Okay. Thank you. Well, please, why don't you go ahead and make your remarks.
Vice Chairman Rosapep, members of the committee, Jamie Gregory with Calfee, Halter and Griswold, here with Mr. Johansson representing Unibel Radomco Westfield that owns 78 shopping centers in 12 countries, including 45 under the Westfield brand, which includes Annapolis Mall, Montgomery Mall, and Wheaton Mall in Maryland. Those three entities generate about $50 million per year in tax revenue to Maryland governments. As far as jobs, Montgomery Mall creates about 3,200 jobs, Wheaton approximately 2,800, and Annapolis a little over 2,000 jobs. So quite the job and revenue relator. As Senator King mentioned, the reason why we're here is only Mr. Rosapep was probably here, but in 2006, 2007, there were several media exposés about how national corporations were using the REIT tax structure to game the tax system. And exemptions were made. There were 3 exemptions. One of them were for those that were owned by Australian real property trusts. Australian real property trusts at the time were the accepted place to do it, similar to the way Delaware is for corporate incorporations. Now, 15 years later, there are several other countries that have similar structures. In 2008, the Multi-State Tax Committee put put out their model legislation. It was updated in 2011, and it allows for qualified foreign entities to also be exempted. Some of the countries that have similar structures, French, Dutch, UK, and Japan. Last point, in 2017, Westfield was purchased by Unibail, which is French.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mike Johansson on behalf of URW. So not to repeat what Jamie said, because I think he covered it. But since 2017, URW, which owns 3 properties in the state of Maryland, has been working with the comptroller's office, and basically their tax status has remained the same, even though the Maryland law only specifically referenced Australian REITs. One of the reasons is to pick out one sole company, and the way the language is worded in the current law, it just says you're an Australian REIT. It doesn't have any qualification that you have a similar tax structure. The comptroller's office has been okay maintaining our tax status. We've been looking at this issue now for 2 years. We actually were talking to members of this committee, including the chair last year, about trying to resolve it. The recommendation was, 1, it's late in session. 2, work with the comptroller to make sure the language is really right. So with the sponsors' help, the comptroller's office, we looked to the Multi-State Tax Commission, which had a very extensive study on this issue, and the language in the bill today mirrors the Multi-State Tax Commission model law, which was intended to properly subject the captive REITs that were evading taxes, but not capture REITs that weren't. And those REITs that were in Australia that had certain tax provisions, or in certain other foreign qualified countries, have tax provisions that don't permit you to game the system. So this is really a continuation for us. So we're happy that the bill would now be fixed. The second issue is we've also been talking with the comptroller's office related to annual distributions. Under the IRS code, you can make kind of deferred annual distributions, and we hope to kind of resolve something with them over the interim going forward on that. But we do ask you to pass the bill. We know with respect to us, it doesn't create any tax change at all.
Thank you. Are there any questions for Senator King or for the witnesses? I have one. So what is the essential difference between current law and this model law from the MTC?
Correct. So Maryland law, there's 4, the captive REITs were subject to an addition back. That way they couldn't avoid it. Okay.
Yep.
And current law had 3 of the Multi-State Tax Commission exemptions from the add back. This bill only adds number 4, which deals with qualified foreign trusts.
I see. So we were similar to what they recommended, but this would exempt basically foreign owned. It's basically foreign owned.
Correct. Not just Australian, which we match the same as MTC, but also now qualified foreign owned entities.
I'm sorry. Why does it work with Australia and not in France?
So I think at the time, so since Maryland got to the captive REIT language before even the Multi-State Tax Commission looked at it, Westfield was an Australian REIT, and I think the senator from Montgomery County that the sponsor at the time said, you guys are being taxed correctly, so we're not going to have this addition.
I see.
So Australian popped in before the whole definition.
I get it. I get it. All right. Thank you. Any other questions? Going once, going twice. Thank you very much.
We appreciate it.
That concludes the hearing on Senate Bill 968. And Senator King is going to take the chair.
Okay, we have Senate Bill 906 with Senator Rosapap.
Thank you. And we have a panel here, if they could join us. So thank you, Madam Chair and members of the committee. So this bill came out of a working group that I participated in over the last year or so around what's called manufacturing 4.0. And one way to think about this is you remember cars, and then you think about cars today. We call them computers on wheels because the technology has moved so fast. Well, that's basically true in manufacturing. And the issue here is how do we help manufacturing in Maryland by helping our manufacturers go down very fast on the learning curve for the technology that's involved. And that's technology in terms of things like robotics. A lot of it's software. A lot of it is training workers to be able to use the systems, integrate with outside providers. It gets very complex very quickly. And essentially what this does is create a grant program in the Department of Commerce for grants to Maryland manufacturers to help them move down the learning curve in the technology involved. The House has passed this bill with a slightly lower fiscal note on it, and I'll be happy to offer that amendment when we take this up, or if we take this up. With that, I'd love to turn it over to my panel who knows much more about this than I do.
You go first.
Okay.
Yeah, before I start, I do want to thank Senator.
Sure.
Oops, sorry. For all the time you spent on the committee. It was fantastic. It was a lot of hours, but we really appreciate it. Hello, I'm Ken Sanchez, CEO of Chesapeake Specialty, a small minority manufacturer in Baltimore. One of the very few manufacturers left in Sparrows Point. Manufacturing is the goose that keeps laying the golden eggs for Maryland. In 2019, manufacturing generated $25 billion for Maryland's economy with an average salary of over $91,000. Did we all hear that? An average salary of $91,000, but that was in 2019. In 2023, it's much higher. None of us wants this to go away. Manufacturing drives employment and generates over 80% of all Maryland exports, totaling $10 billion. This is made possible by only 5% of Maryland businesses. I know this because my company exports more than 35% of our products out of the country. We export more than 90% of our products out of the state. All of these dollars come back to Maryland. Without your help, manufacturers and their jobs may soon leave the state or go out of business. More importantly, the new ones may not get started. To remain competitive, manufacturers must retool with Industry 4.0 technology. This technology is incredibly expensive and risky because standards are not yet developed. However, if the state does not invest in manufacturing, manufacturers may be forced to relocate to nearby manufacturer-friendly states who are offering more than $350 million in 4.0 support and incentives to manufacturing. This doesn't even include the tax incentives. And by the way, I just heard New Jersey bumped it up to $30 million. Hopefully someone else is going to talk about that. Manufacturing is not just an essential part of our economy, it's also a key driver of hope for our lower and middle class. Manufacturers train the people in our community who have no college education and struggle to get jobs. Industry 4.0 will help these jobs remain viable. The future of manufacturing in Maryland depends on your action today. Please vote to keep manufacturing in Maryland, increase support for technology adoption, and prevent us from becoming a warehousing state. This is not corporate welfare, but rather manufacturing survival. The future of Maryland's manufacturing economy depends on your support. Thank you for your time and consideration.
Thank you. Mike Kelleher.
Thank you, Senator. Thank you to the committee for having me here today. With an extra thank you to Senator Rosapep for your support and effort in putting forward this critical piece of legislation that will positively impact the Maryland manufacturing community. My name is Michael Kelleher. I'm the Executive Director of the Maryland Manufacturing Extension Partnership. We are a nonprofit organization that works statewide to support and grow our manufacturing enterprises here in Maryland. And I'm here today to testify in favor of Senate Bill 906 for the creation of the Industry 4.0 Technology Grant Program. In my role with the MEP, I'm very fortunate. I get to work very closely with some of Maryland's nearly 4,000 manufacturers across the state. These companies employ more than 110,000 workers, and more than 85% of these companies are small and very small businesses. In an effort to compete globally, these manufacturers must continually invest in new technologies, an investment that can be both challenging and costly, especially for these small and medium-sized businesses. The investments in 4.0 technologies like robotics, automation, sensor technologies, and highly complex machinery can cost upwards of $100,000 and often cases into the millions of dollars. This matching grant that we're proposing will help de-risk the investment for these small and mid-sized businesses and help make our manufacturers more competitive on the global landscape. As the senator said, Senate Bill 906 is the direct result of efforts of the Industry 4.0 Working Group, which has worked tirelessly for the last 2 years to look at different programs around the country to support the manufacturing sector. The recommendations that came out of this working group were modeled after what we see in other states that have technology grant programs available for the small and mid-sized businesses to tap into to help make access to capital more easy, help de-risk the investment in access to capital, but more importantly, to match the industry investment with a commitment from the state. As Mr. Sanchez said, we were just made aware of our neighboring states in New Jersey that had a $20 million program that was increased to $30 million a year just in the last legislative session. So for these reasons, we kindly ask for your support and consideration for this important piece of legislation so that our manufacturers here in Maryland can continue to grow and thrive and compete both domestically as well as globally. Thank you.
Thank you. We have one more witness. You're not on my list, but you can go ahead and testify anyway.
I snuck in, thanks to
Okay.
Senator Rosapep. I'm Mike Galeazzo. I'm the president of an organization called Regional Manufacturing Institute. And I also want to thank Senator Rosapep for standing by us in our industry. And Jim, as you well know, we share the same values and trying to support working class people in Maryland. That's why we do what we do. Let me begin by telling you about a conversation I had recently with Governor Moore. Get your attention, okay? I said to the governor that my vision is to make Maryland a national showcase for next generation American manufacturing. We have the talent, we have the people, and we have the leadership to make that bold vision happen. So the governor, looked at me and smiled, of course, okay, and said, Mike, I think, my vision is to make Maryland a national showcase for America. Now, these two visions go together since manufacturing is a wealth-producing industry, an early adopter of advanced technologies, a critical part of our supply chain, and a key industry sector. Manufacturing is an instrument of social change. It is a pathway from poverty to prosperity, offering good-paying jobs with benefits. Over the years, I've learned that economic development and human development is human development when it's done right. And that is why I come down to Annapolis for decades arguing to support of manufacturing. Senate Bill 906 and its companion bill that was passed today, House Bill 622, is a major step in the right direction. So let me end by there are many reasons why this bill should be supported, but let me just mention quickly 3. Manufacturing today is at the heart of our national security preparedness. President Biden and the majority of Maryland's congressional delegation has argued for this point. Secondly, Maryland is a national leader in carbon reduction, and this bill will help with that, and I agree with that. And finally, when we look at the data and compare Maryland's investment in manufacturing grant programs, it's clear that we're not in the game yet, but this bill will put us in the game. Thank you.
Okay, any questions for the committee? Go ahead.
First of all, I want to thank you for being here, for your testimony. I think it's just something that we have lost in the past decade or two of general industry that I like, what we had for the longest time. And we are getting better and doing more, but there's so much more we need to do. So, more than anything, if we can progress and work like we are, I believe, at Trade Point and other places, I think we can do some great things. So first of all, it's good to meet you, my constituent. And more than anything, I thank the good senator for this bill. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Anybody else? All right, thank you very much. Okay, Senator Rosapep, you then have Senate Bill 922.
Yes, Senate Bill 922, we're switching from the manufacturing industry to the construction industry.
Okay.
folks in this committee and throughout the Senate have heard me periodically about that our career paths and training paths aren't all that they might be, and why we need to expand apprenticeships. Well, the construction industry is an example of one that they actually have that right. They figured out apprenticeship pathways long ago, and we have a colleague here in the committee who's a graduate of that system. What they don't have is enough people wanting to enter the industry. I think all of us sort of know that there are good, high-paying jobs, high-skilled jobs, important jobs that cannot be offshored, and they can't attract enough people to come into the field. And so what the Maryland Center for Construction, Education, and Innovation has been doing over the years is essentially doing the marketing for the construction industry, for union, non-union, all different kinds of trades, all different kinds of approaches to attract folks in. And they've done it on a shoestring. And what this bill does is adds another string or two. So it's several $100,000 increase in the state investment in the Maryland Center. To me, this is a very low cost, high impact economic development intervention. So with that, I'd be happy to.
And you brought a great star witness with you.
Exactly.
Today.
So turn it over to someone who knows more about that.
Thank you, Mr. Knott. Glad you're here today.
Madam Chairwoman, thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be back in this room testifying on yet another bill. I like the manufacturing bills that were just talked about. Thanks, Senator Rosa Pepp, for boosting that industry as well. When we first created the MCCEI in 2009, a collection of construction executives met at the Governor's Workforce Investment Board. 3 years and hundreds of meetings across the state later, we recommended the formation of the MCCEI, a nonprofit to help fix the broken pathways in our education system and bring together workforce, education, and our businesses to make progress together. Our first report, The Critical Path, which laid out the path of what we needed to do, resulted in hundreds of interviews with all the players from around the state. We identified 6 deficiencies. I'm going to go over them quickly. Create and expand construction education programs at the Maryland 4-year institutions to meet the demands of Maryland's construction companies. Better align K through 12 career CTE and community college and apprenticeship programs with new construction skill requirements. Create and strengthen articulations between high schools, CTE programs, apprenticeships, community colleges, and our universities, and define educational pathways for careers in construction. Create a public image campaign to convey attractive construction-related career options. We were at the bottom of the list. We're starting to move up. And create a strategy to include demographic groups that have not been historically participated in the industry's workforce development. Finally, recognize and adapt to the substantial, mirrors what's happening and what in the manufacturing industry, substantial technological changes in construction environment. So we've participated in the movement of this needle. We need to do so much more work. This additional funds will help us get there. And I'm going to turn it over to Jen Sproul, who is in Nevada at the largest construction gathering on the planet, our executive director.
Welcome.
Good afternoon. Apologies for not being there in person. But as you said, I'm Jennifer Sproul, the President and Executive Director of MCCEI. I respectfully ask you today to favorably report on Senate Bill 922, which expands opportunities for the construction industry for all Marylanders, particularly high school students and underserved populations in Maryland. And the proposed funding increase will allow us to expand our outreach and facilitation of programs conducted by MCCEI. Last week marked the 25th annual Women in Construction Week. It highlights the impact that women are making on the construction industry. While our numbers have increased in recent years, we still only make up 13.6% of the construction workforce in Maryland. And the fact is that most women do not realize that they can not only work in the industry, but they get a family-sustaining career in construction, where the wage gap is almost non-existent. And that's why MCCEI's work as an independent workforce intermediary is so vital. We are committed to making careers in the built environment attractive and accessible to all, particularly underserved communities in our state. And with increased funding, we can hope to expand upon programs like our summer camp partnership with Baltimore City Public Schools and the Ileana Foundation, our Higher Up program with MOED. And in 2022, we spoke to over 500 students about careers in construction in Maryland. We need 10 times that. Our work aligns with the blueprint for Maryland's future goals, and with your support for increased capacity can help them be met. A mandate by 2030, 45% of high school students must have work-based learning and or industry certified credentials. And our work will address the college and career readiness related goals in that legislation. We spend $2.2 billion a year in Maryland funding our colleges and universities, and only 25% of residents will actually have a college degree within 5 years of graduating from high school. It's time to invest in the other 75% of students in Maryland and give them a path to success that will work for them. And thank you.
Thank you. Any questions? Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Next, we have Senator Zucker, 934.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair, distinguished members of the Senate Budget and Taxation Committee. Glad to be here with some fantastic folks that are teaming up with me on Senate Bill 934. Colleagues, this is regarding the Division of Rehabilitation Services, otherwise known as DORS, and this helps individuals with developmental disabilities work. So why is this bill important? It really is going to do two things. One is it's going to help address staffing shortages around this. And also every year, the state of Maryland leaves millions and millions of dollars of federal money on the table. So what this does is this would increase the state portion of our commitment, the state, so state funds. And by doing that, it provides more opportunity to access federal funds. You all, I think, are familiar with the DORS program, and especially for this vulnerable and very important community, it's important to make sure that we're accessing the federal funds that we need. And I don't believe, Madam Chair and colleagues, there's any opposition to this bill. So with that, I'll turn it over to my fantastic panel.
Madam Chair, members of the committee, I'm Rachel London, the Executive Director of the Maryland Developmental Disabilities Council. You have our written testimony, but I want to highlight a couple of things. So DORS services are provided to adults and to youth. Actually, and the youth are newer. So in 2014, when the Workforce Innovation and Opportunity Act changed also the focus of what DORS did. And that's when they included those pre-employment transition services so that students had access to work-based learning and job training while they were still in school to prepare them for life after school. A great thing, but it increased the amount of work for DORS, right? And they're serving a lot of kids, and they're but with the increase, their caseloads went from the DORS active caseloads increased by 5,000-6,000 a year. So the increased staff is particularly important because we want to continue and have to continue under the federal law to serve and support those transition age youth 14 to 21. The second thing is the requirements of this legislation, and thank you to Senator Zucker, are supported by the DORS Commission. The commission created by the General Assembly last year. And as a member of that commission, I could tell you we've really been focused on recommendations that improve effectiveness and efficiency of the organization, that improves the services and supports, and also ensures that the people who are working at DORS and helping people are able to continue to do so. So both parts of this bill, both the federal, the match, the state funding for the match of the federal funds, and the increased staff is strongly supported by that DORS Commission and their recommendations. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair, members of the committee. I'm Laura Howe, the Executive Director of the Maryland Association of Community Services. We have about 120 agencies that support people with developmental disabilities across the state of Maryland. And we are here in strong support of Senate Bill 934. Community providers in your districts and across the state partner with DORS to provide a continuum of employment supports to adults who have transitioned out of school. We support people who range from the age of 22 to age of retirement. And sometimes that is, 55 or 60, and sometimes it's 75 or 80 in our community because people want to work. So we want to give them the opportunity to do that. As an employment first state, Maryland across the board puts a lot of effort into supporting people with developmental disabilities to have the jobs that they want, to help them get them and keep them. And DORS plays a really crucial role. And we're seeing a waiting list the size that we haven't typically seen in the past. So this bill is important to address that. It also would, bring in that significant level of federal matching funds, which is really, we think, a wise investment. So we thank Senator Zucker for tackling this issue, and we urge a favorable report. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Any questions or comments? I think we're good. Thank you. Okay, Senator McCray. We have Senate Bill 952. You have one witness? One witness signed up.
Okay. Bill, did you sign up? Bill? Madam Chair.
You can just bring them up. Just bring them up.
Thank you. And I'll make sure that Bill Sturber and Gary Brown will say their names.
Thank you, Senator.
Madam Chair, Mr. Vice Chair, just thank you again for the deference. For the record, my name is Corey McCray. I'll make sure that I'm swift with this presentation, but I come to you before something that you have heard before, which is the historic revitalization tax credit. We've done it in years past. My partner in progress at the time was Eric Lukey, but we know he's all ascended to a different position. This deals with small commercial and residential projects that we will be offering this for in my district. Respectfully, I've seen where this progress has happened in places like Johnson Square, Oliver, Greenmount West, but this is a statewide tax credit, which should be recognized. And there's definitely a significant amount of demand for the statewide tax credit. This complements things like the opportunity zones, and the funding appropriation would go on from 2025, Madam Chair, to 2031. As stated, I'll let the other folks be able to provide the technical parts of the bill and some of the other things that we've been able to see successes from this tax credit. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Great, yeah, I'll go. Madam Chair, committee members, thank you for thank you for the time. Katie Parks, Preservation, Maryland. The historic revitalization tax credit is a powerful tool to address economic and neighborhood revitalization challenges in small towns and urban downtowns across the state. And as a statewide historic preservation nonprofit, I want to emphasize that the tax credit touched communities from Cumberland to Pocomoke City in the last round, but projects statewide still sit stalled because demand greatly outweighs the available resources. And both Dr. Rodwell and Bill Sturber will touch on some of those projects that are currently awaiting resources. But the historic tax credit generates positive revenue for the state with a demonstrated return on investment. For every dollar of tax credit, there's over $8 of economic activity generated in the state, and it creates permanent jobs and increases local property taxes. The requested increase would also address regional competitiveness. So Virginia invests about $100 million in their state historic tax credit program. West Virginia has increased their allocation to $30 million. And for states that have similar budget and population size, including Massachusetts and Wisconsin, they both invest $50 million annually into their state historic tax credit. We see the HTC as an important investment in Maryland's communities and economies, and we ask for a favorable report. Thank you.
Thank you. Who's next?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I am Dr. Gary D. Rodwell. I'm the CEO of the nonprofit Coppin Heights Community Development Corporation. where we work in West Baltimore in the footprint of Coppin State University. We are engaged in over $100 million in nonprofit real estate development investment in our community, including the completion of the historic Hebrew Orphan Asylum building, originally constructed in 1873, but sat vacant for 30 years in our community. This over $20 million renovation was initially awarded a $2.3 million historic tax credit award in 2012, the largest award for that year. Obviously, this helped tremendously as it was the first major piece of our capital stack. But although helpful, when applied, it still left substantial debt on our building. Don't be confused. This is a very efficient tool, but imagine the impact that this would have had on our debt if it were funded as this bill suggests. We would have no debt at this point in time. That's an example of one way this bill would meet the demands of the current economic climate in under-resourced neighborhoods like West Baltimore by making a large deal possible. The second relates to the thousands of vacant homes in our West Baltimore community. That's where an increase in the amount of available funds for small deals would be critical. It would allow us to raise potentially up to $100,000 per house in subsidy and bridge it in a way that would be impactful and increase and decrease the appraisal gap in funding our vacant houses. Having access to increased state historic tax credits would allow us to have efficient dollars to fund development while we increase property values, attract new residents and commercial businesses, and bring the state a larger tax base. We encourage you to support this bill. Thank you.
Great. Bill Streever, Cross Street Park Partners, delighted to be here. So we've been at this for 49 years and bear witness to the power that taking falling apart old buildings, typically contaminated industrial sites, and bringing them to new life. We've completed 15 million square feet over the decades and have 3 million square feet underway right now, totaling over $5 billion in investment. In every reuse of an old fallen apart building, there are more jobs today than in the heyday. Procter & Gamble had 700 jobs in the Baltimore Harbor, Under Armour campus, 2,300 jobs, and I could go down a long list of examples. Hugely catalytic in Senator McRae's district, American Brewery, if we did that same use of 25,000 square feet for Humanum, social service organization would have not near the impact of fixing up the glorious old American Brewery building. If you haven't been there, you got to see it. Likewise, home lithograph, also in Senator McRae's district, we went from 90% vacancy around our building before we started. By next year, we'll be 90% renovated, homeowner occupied homes in the blocks around it. Major projects just wouldn't happen today with higher construction interest rate costs and the current cap on state historic tax credits compared to the unlimited credits that were available earlier in the historic tax credit world. Tide Point, Can Company, Montgomery Park, Clipper Mill, OO Mill, none of those projects would happen with today's current caps, nor would, in terms of new projects, the 1 million square feet at Crown Cork and Seal and the last big falling apart industrial complex in Baltimore we haven't done. Historic tax credits are typically the largest single source of funds, 35–40%. Gary can attest to that. And very inefficient without it, because then you're cobbling together 20–30 sources of funds, $250,000 grants, very slow and inefficient. Small deal fund, already talked about. Climate, I love marrying the climate agenda for the legislature. A better way to reduce carbon footprint than fixing up old buildings. And this creates a bigger bonus for LEED Gold sustainable investments. Thank you, and delighted to answer questions anytime. And come visit some of these amazing old buildings.
Okay. Any questions or comments? I don't see any. Thank you very much.
Thank you again, Madam Chair.
Okay, Senator Salling, you're next. Senate Bill 907. You have one witness?
Yes, ma'am.
Dear Madam Chair, Vice Chair and Committee, I want to thank you for the opportunity to speak on this bill today. For the record, I'm Senator John R. Salling, it's Senate Bill 907, Maryland Film Office, Entertainment and Fun, Film Fund, a grant program establishment. Throughout the years, Maryland has had a host of companies and productions in the state of Maryland, and those movies and televisions. Most notable are House of Cards, The Wire, The West Wing, St. Elmo's Fire, Patriot Games, Wedding Crashers, and others. This bill will give our governor the option to set aside $5 million in the budget to assist with the production costs of entertainment and films projects in the state of Maryland. The maximum would be a $200,000 will be used for every qualified project until the $5 million is exhausted. I've also put an amendment in the change the shall to a may to ensure that the bill is not a mandate in the governor's administration. This bill would give many artists an opportunity to complete their projects and give Maryland an opportunity to be showcased on the world stage like Atlanta, like LA, like other places in New York. I hope that we can get a favorable vote in this bill, move it forward, and let Maryland and Baltimore be the Hollywood on the East Coast. Thank you very much.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for having me in this afternoon. My name is Irv Becker. I am a resident of Baltimore County and also a small business owner in Harford County, but I'm also a proud member of the Screen Actors Guild. I am a professional actor. I've lived on the West Coast for several years, but my life has been a mixture of dreams and fate. Dreams start when you're a little kid. Mine started when I was in 8th grade, and I had a chance to step on the stage when I was cast as Oliver in Oliver Twist. My next big step of my dream chase was I was cast in John Waters' Crybaby. On that set, I met fellow filmmakers like myself. And we said, well, if John Waters can do it and Barry Levinson can do it, why can't we do it? So I began this journey of doing other independent films. The rub is always financing and getting money. No matter how great the project is, it's hard to raise funds. With today's technology, $200,000 will allow us to make a legit Hollywood movie. Hiring local crew, local cast members, very diverse ethnic backgrounds, locations, commerce. We've got a project right now called The Chop Shop. We've already had interest from the Academy Award-winning actor Robert Duvall, who lives in Virginia, that would do a cameo with us. Stephen Bauer, who's been known from shows like Scarface, Breaking Bad. We've already got international distribution lined up from Archstone Entertainment, who's a division of Sony. So these $200,000 grants will allow guys like me that are young future filmmakers and actors to pursue our dream. And Maryland was the little Hollywood. When I was on the set of Crybaby, John Waters was well known. Probably most of you in this room know John Waters and Barry Levinson. And then things kind of cooled off. It got expensive to film in Maryland. So there's a whole slew of young creative people that are in this state. And where fate comes into play is that I ran into this fine senator one night out singing karaoke. And we were watching college wrestling, and I started telling him about what I do. And he said, well, let me see if I can help. And here I am today. So if you guys could help us with this bill, you will not only allow myself, but other filmmakers to make legit movies that will be seen on Netflix and Amazon Prime, and it would really be awesome.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, guys.
He is our karaoke
I love it.
karaoke
We
star.
still hang out. He's a great guy, and he cares about his district because he's
Okay.
actually in my district. So he
Thank
does
you
care.
so much.
Thank you, guys.
Any questions? I think we're good.
Thank you, folks.
Senator Reedy, you want to do your Senate Bill 897?
Yes, Madam, I guess, Madam Acting Chair, and I have a
Adam,
colleague-
whatever.
I have a colleague or someone to
Okay.
bring up from the
You
Carroll
can bring
County
him up.
government as well.
Sure.
Mr. Fowler. All right. To our chair, vice chair, and committee members, I'm Senator Justin Reedy here for the record to present Senate Bill 897. Carroll County Contracts and Purchasing. As amended, this local bill it was requested by our Carroll County commissioners. It would increase the threshold below which the county's procurement officer may approve bids. Currently, the threshold is $25,000, which has been that way for a long time. They'd like to raise it to $50,000. It's for two reasons. One, it's keeping up with inflation. It has been quite some time since it was raised. And number two, it eases the amount of work required to conduct a formal bid for the very few bids that fall between $25,000 and $50,000. Procurement staffs are simply executing items that are already approved in the budget. The last time the bid amount was raised was 2001. So we've had this level since 2001. There is a link which we provided in testimony, but the bid process and open bids will all be found still online on the Carroll County website. So there's not going to be, people can still find out what's being approved and what's going on. We did have an amendment to simply change the amendment provided changes the chief of the Bureau of Purchasing in the bill to procurement officer, which just reflects current titles in other counties for that position. Our Senate and House delegation voted unanimously in favor of Senate Bill 897, and we would ask for a favorable vote. And with that, I'll turn it over to Mr. Fowler.
Michael Fowler. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the committee. For the record, Michael Fowler, I'm the legislative liaison for the Board of Commissioners. I here asking for a favorable for Senate Bill 897. Just to reiterate what the senator said. So this action is intended to reduce staff workload by reducing the number of formal bid packages that need to be prepared and managed, and thereby reducing costs and increasing efficiency. Current law and policy requires a minimum of 3 quotes for what's considered small procurement. That policy will continue. It also aligns the county with a number of other counties and with the state, and it will maintain financial controls and best practices. So for those reasons, the commissioners ask for a favorable report.
Thank you. Any questions? Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Have a good day.
Okay, Senator Washington, certainly last but not least. Senate Bill 881. And you have 3 witnesses?
I don't know if I still have.
Yes, two witnesses and a virtual, I think.
Thank you.
No virtual.
Good.
Okay.
I guess I'll just get right to it. You all know that we continue to have challenges in our area of childcare providers, workforce, that the impacts of COVID are continuing, as well as the impacts that while it is quite the employee market in terms of some of our higher paying employers are still looking for employees. And so the fact that our childcare providers and our reimbursement rates, et cetera, don't currently allow for there to be these higher rates. On average, our childcare providers are making about $16 an hour. And so to address some of that, we instituted a really great program where we provided a number of incentives, some to the providers themselves. We're looking at developing alternative ways of licensure to allow people to become raise up to the standards that we've set forth in the blueprint. Over the last 2 years, we created about $16 million fund to support for new hires and bonuses. Because we're still, in this challenge, SB 881 proposes to continue to fund the program for another 2 years, not at the $16 million level that it has been funded, but at a $6 million, having $4 million for new hires, because we still need to hire people, and $2 million for hiring. The other thing is that we want to make some adjustments to how the bonuses are allocated. The research is saying, and our experiences suggest that giving people either a signing bonus up front or something at the end does not support retention. So the idea would be to sort of give out 3 separate payouts over time to sort of reinforce and encourage that they'll stay. Again, the research, the national data is suggesting that if you give out the periods over a longer period of time, even though it's the same dollar amount, that it results in retaining people better. We are, however, increasing the dollar amount from $1,000 to $1,500. $1,000 just doesn't get you what it used to anymore. So we are in total providing for $1,500 over the course of the year at those Maryland Child Care credentialing programs, and also people who are participating in our child care scholarship programs. And the amendments are to that effect, that are providing the bonuses are awarded on the basis of participation. So encouraging, saying that there has to be a minimum for hours. We didn't really have that in there for the awards, and that also they had to commit. They have to remain employed with the provider for 9 months. So if you get your first 500 and you don't stay employed for 9 months, you don't get there can be a clawback. And then you have to commit to remaining with that provider for the additional 12 months. The second award to a participating child, again, would allow for 20 hours a week for 6 months. And yeah, that's kind of similar. So again, yeah, so that we lay out all of these steps, and again, it's all to increase retention. This has been a successful program. We understand that finances are tight. I would hope that we would make this a shall, in that we really know this works. We really know that there's a big need. I'm asking for your favorable report for Senate Bill 881.
Thank you.
And I apologize, Madam Chair, we're voting on my.
Go right ahead.
Bill,
Go
so
right
I'll
ahead.
get that.
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, Chris Bush.
Great, yes, thanks. I'm Christina Bush, Executive Director of the Maryland State Child Care Association, representing over 5,000 child care professionals in Maryland. Thanks to the esteemed committee, and kudos to Senator Washington for her unwavering leadership for children, families, and child care. MSCCA favorably supports SB 881. Child care providers and advocates alike say recruiting and retaining child care workforce is now one of their biggest challenges. Senate Bill 881 continues the efforts of legislative SB 806, codified in law July 1st, 2022, for 1 year, which still has not been distributed to the essential child care workforce yet. Child care is a unique business. The majority of child care expenses are fixed, and most child care businesses spend between 60 to 70% of revenue on staffing. They cannot operate any part of their businesses remotely. They cannot automate or change practices to adjust, and they must maintain adherence to about 50 pages of COMAR regulations, including strict teacher-child staffing ratios. As a top 3 household expense for families already, raising tuition is a last resort and simply untenable for many providers. Maryland has lost well over 800 licensed child care programs since the pandemic, and our industry has been one of the slowest to recover. Many programs have demand for services, but cannot open space or classroom due to the critical workforce shortages plaguing small businesses, especially childcare. Low wages and inadequate compensation, lacking of benefits, have long plagued our industry. And on average, as Senator Washington said, workers in the U.S. are paid $13.51 per hour in childcare, according to the Economic Policy Institute analysis. This data aligns with Maryland's average salary of $27,000 per year for a childcare teacher, according to Maryland Family Network's public policy manual. That's nearly half of what the U.S. worker makes. There's a critical need for more resources to better support parental needs for childcare, to bolster and expand childcare businesses, and to be able to improve wages and the benefits of childcare professionals. Childcare is an economic and equity imperative, and we must act to decrease the declining workforce, and because Marylanders cannot work without childcare. SB 881 contributes to the resources needed to support essential childcare, as you know, in budget and taxation. Every penny counts.
Thank you, Chris.
Yeah.
Hello,
Good
Mr.
evening.
Kavanaugh.
Senator King, Vice Chair Rose Pep, and members of the committee, for the record, Terry Kavanaugh on behalf of SEIU Local 500, here in support of SB 881. As you may know, Local 500 represents thousands of child care providers across Maryland. We've testified before the committee this session in support of several bills involving child care. In general, they all are directed towards the same goal: increasing the number of qualified child care providers so that parents can access quality, affordable child care. This would be a win for our kids, for parents, providers, and Maryland businesses. I'm sure that whether it's talking to your constituents over the last year, reading public opinion polls or talking to economists, you know the key role that childcare has had in some cases stalling our economy because people can't get back to work because they can't find childcare. We, in addition to Senator Washington, we want to thank you, especially Senator King, for the bills that you've introduced to address this issue, not only this session, but over the years. We believe that we can find a solution to this problem. It's going to cost, it's going to involve resources, but that's to this committee, that's probably not a surprise. We ask that you not allow this opportunity to address this issue during the session to pass without taking action. For all those reasons, we support SB 881 and ask for a favorable report.
Okay, thank you very much. Any questions or comments? Okay, thank you.
Thanks.
Members of the committee, I've been asked to have you stay here. We have something we have to vote on, so be patient. I think it's probably your bill because that's the only bill that we care about.
Okay, everybody, we're live. We're gonna do a quick voting session. I apologize for taking up your time. But this will be really quick. Philip?
We'll start with 622.
Just the one. We're just gonna do the one.
Big one.
The wage.
You go.
Yeah.
Senate Bill. Kim.
What? Oh.
Senate Bill 555 is the minimum wage bill. You all are secondary, finance is primary. The bill accelerates the $15 an hour minimum wage starting January 1, 2024 for all employers regarding of size. Finance struck the consumer price index adjustment provisions. And then
Senator McCray went to talk to.
Okay.
I would have told Senator.
can I get? Yeah.
Kim?
And then as discussed last year, the bill also repeals scheduled increases for certain providers. I believe those future increases were accounted for in the current budget.
Okay. So we held this yesterday, probably in large part because of me. I was concerned about the provider rates and had extensive conversations with the administration and with some in the providers, the community. It's a trying to get this right is always complex. And I've been knee deep in it for a bunch of years now, trying to get it right, trying to get the rate studies done. So we aren't sort of in some ways arbitrarily picking a percentage every year. The reason I was concerned is because there are 2 years after this year, again, of sort of that arbitrary pick, if you will, for the amount. We are getting really close to the rate study being done on one of the entities that is driven by this, and that's the DD community. And I hope that we'll have that next year. And I believe that the administration is working very hard to get there. Basically, the bottom line is that the administration put in a substantial amount of money to cover the rate, the minimum wage increase. So as that would go up, assuming we pass that bill, there would be money to cover that. And that's been in the budget since day one, which I believe was absolutely the right thing to do. But the out years have gotten peeled away from this. And this discussion that we're having and that we continue to have about out years and mandates and all those kinds of things. I'm willing, because I have confidence in the conversations that I've had, that the administration is going to do a good job and come to reasonable and conclusions that everyone can live with as we move forward between both rate studies and things that we have to come up with numbers to fill in the gaps until rate studies are done. So that's the long and short of it, probably more than folks were really necessarily deep into. But I think the good news is I have confidence in working with the administration moving forward. So I'm comfortable moving the bill as is.
Second.
Any discussion? Okay. Yes, sir.
Page 10.
Yes.
I'm looking at the top line, the bracketed. And I forgot what bracketed means versus what's been struck. So everybody's will go up to 15 January 1, this upcoming new year.
Yes.
Okay. The 15 and not that 14. Why is that not struck line through versus everything else?
So the strike through would be current by amendment, and then the bracket would have been the bill is introduced.
Got it. Thank you.
So the effect is the same.
Senator Bailey?
I have one quick brief question. If you were in like my local, so are in a contract with different things like the teachers, different groups that they have a 2-year contract with. How are the locals going to make up the money for this that they're going to have to start paying right now? That's not in their budget. They had anticipated what was set forward before, but they're going to have to make up that extra.
You have an answer?
I don't have an answer to that.
Yeah, we don't have an answer to that. You want to see if you can get Smolsky over here?
Yeah, I'd let him know finance was finishing voting.
We'll try to get you an answer. Just as a point,
There he is.
how handy was that?
Got a question.
Where was it? Oh, okay.
That's some service from finance right there.
You'll be seeing a lot of me when cannabis starts coming up.
Senator Bailey has a question for you.
So we were talking about the increase that takes place this year instead of, the way it was projected out. There are certain contracts that we enter into, like, let's say, with the teachers, with their union contract, where the teachers have their local government already met with them and they have a contract that is standing. So now all of a sudden in January, with this bill taking place, they will then have to readjust that. And I'm just wondering from the local government perspective, is the state helping them at all to cover that? Or is this just an expense that they have that they will have to incur?
There's nothing in here about helping local governments cover their costs. I would imagine that, again, if you're under a collective bargaining agreement, chances are you're making over $15. Now, if there has to be some adjustment, as they continue their negotiations, I don't know how much adjustment they would have to make to accommodate the fifth, because there aren't that many people in government employment who make minimum wage. Almost all of them are over the minimum wage. As far as I know, I think the only folks in state government that make minimum wage or near it or in the university system, and they're the people who work in cafeterias and things like that. But I don't know if it would affect any collective bargaining. Now, if they have to if they have to redo the base wage or something like that, they might have to renegotiate that. But no, that would be up to their negotiations and what they have in their agreements.
Okay, thank you.
Senator Corbin.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I think I know the answer to this, but just double checking. So on January 1, it sets it at 15 across the board.
Across the board.
So no more allocation for if you're a small business with a certain amount of employees, it's a different rate. And like everyone, no matter if you have 2 people or if you have 200 people, $15.
If you're subject to the state wage and hour law, $15, yes.
Okay, thank you.
Senator King.
What about tipped workers? How does this affect
Tip
them?
workers are not in this bill. The governor did not put them in the bills introduced. This has no effect on tip workers. Their tip wage stays the same, which I believe is $3, and the tip credit is $3.50.
Okay, thank you.
there was a separate bill on that.
Senator Jennings.
Thank you, sir. So back in my days in finance, we dealt with this bill. Was it this one that dealt with other counties like Montgomery or something that preempted?
No,
Wouldn't
that
allow
was
them?
that was the Healthy Working Families Act, where you preempted, except for Montgomery County, who already had their own law. Yes, that was the Healthy Working Families Act. That was a paid sick leave act.
So there's no preempted in this word. A
No,
county can't raise it
a
higher.
county can go higher than this wage, and I think Montgomery is going to be higher than that eventually, or they might already be there right now. But no, a local government can enact a higher wage than this.
Okay. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Is the bill specific in tip wages? Like people that, is it very specific at that? Because there is different types of businesses or restaurants that they depend on tips, but there's also people that like there's runners. And is it specific in that also? It didn't change anything regarding the tip credit for tipped employees. They still have to meet the standards in the law regarding being a tip. And I don't think the language is actually in here, but they have to make so much of their money in tips. They have to work this or that. What it would do though is by increasing the minimum wage, each tipped employee, regardless of whether they're a tipped employee, still has to make the minimum wage. So if their tips aren't enough for that pay period to get them to $15 an hour, the employer would have to supplement their paycheck. So they're making at least 15 hours for that pay period. Many tipped employees make well, over the minimum wage if you count their tips. So if a guy was delivering pizza and he was getting three and a quarter an hour, and he would depend on tips, and he was getting probably at the end of the day, maybe $10, $11 an hour, they would have to make that adjustment. The employer would be required by law to bring that employee up to the minimum wage. Okay, thank you.
You did it, all right. Okay, any other questions? Okay, we have favorable, okay. All those in favor, raise your hand. Opposed? All right. Very good. What is that? Yeah, you can do it now to let the committee know.
Everybody, yesterday, I think it was yesterday, I'm losing track of time. We voted out unanimously the End the Wait Act, and what it did was it just provided, we had set up a dedicated purpose account to get people off different waivers. This gives the waiver programs that coincide with the End the Wait access to the dedicated purpose account. And everything that we just voted on resembles these amendments. We just never accepted the amendments. Remember when Philip was talking about that includes hiring, retaining staff, that some of that money could be used for. It's not adding any money, it's just accessing it. So we just needed to actually adopt the amendment. So.
All in favor?
Plus you also had added all B&T, and then Senator Hester also has to be co-sponsor, so this plus the co-sponsors.
With this and then all the sponsors.
Yep, got it. Any we done?
When do we turn it off?
Yeah.
Oh,